Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Doctor Who and the Silurians, written by Malcolm Hulke and directed by Timothy Combs, I believe his name, that's how he pronounces his last name, and it's the first story to be produced by legendary Doctor Who producer Barry Letts. This 7-part story is the first story which was filmed on videotape, and the actual story itself is technically lost. So if you've been watching these with me and you've gone from Spearheads from Space to the Silurians, you would find that in terms of picture quality, there's a massive dip. And that's because though the actual master tapes have gone missing, and obviously the last story was all made in film, here what they did is they found recovered footage of old videotapes, and as well they had a master of a black and white version, and they put them together. So that's how we got this story here. So if that does bother you, I am sorry, but you can't help it. It's the 1970s for you. Actually, this story and the previous story was actually made in 1969, making them the only colour Doctor Who stories made during the 60s. That's a fun fact. Oh, unless you count the Peter Cushing movies, which we technically don't, so there you go. So, this is Malcolm Hulke's first solo story. He was a writer who worked on the War Games. And does he have a great solo run? I mean, like I said, the War Games is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories, but with two writers, is it one better than the other, or is it the match of both? Here we can compare, as this one has just got one of the writers, Malcolm Hulke. So, does it work? It's good, but it's not great. It's fun, it's enjoyable, it has some great spooky moments, but it's not particularly the best it could have been. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story is the first in a new format known as the diplomacy stories, which is when the Doctor and his crew get caught in between two factions, two groups that are almost going to war with each other. And the Doctor's basically trying to make peace with both of them. He doesn't see really the bad guy, if that makes sense. So he's trying to work out like who's on his side and stuff, and tries to get them to talk to each other. And usually what happens is that it fails, and the climax is the rivalry between these two factions. And here it's the humans versus the Silurians, creatures which have existed on Earth before humans, and so they basically feel like they're entitled to the Earth now. And so a few faction of them want to destroy humanity, whilst there's about one or two that actually thinks they can coexist. Usually in this kind of format, you have four main players. You have, in each of the teams, you have the ones that are willing to negotiate and willing to work with each other. And then you've got the other two characters on each team that can't see a coexistence and wants to destroy the other. Now, on the Silurians' point of view, the characters are clearly defined. You've got the one that doesn't want to work with the humans, and you've got the lead character who thinks that cooperation with humans is their best cope for survival. And the Doctor kind of shows them a way on how they could survive with each other, as humans don't use a lot of the more warmer parts of the planet of Earth, which the reptilian Silurians thrive in. And it works. The Silurians, okay, let's just talk about the Silurians. They are fantastically designed creatures. I love the look of these creatures. They're the reptile, skinny oil, and the weird design of their face with the third eye. And the way they're shot as well, I think, really works. I think if they had them in the light, in the sunlight, they might have been a bit cheesy, a bit silly. I never really liked the Silurian designs in in like behind the scenes stuff, or in like when they do documentaries and stuff, and they have them in like in broad daylight. So when I was going to rewatch this one, I was worried that these suits are not going to hold up, but really they work fantastically well. And I think the main aspect is that they're shot mainly in the dark, and the lighting on this story, especially when they're in the caves, works phenomenally. Now there is a scene where one of them, an injured Silurian, goes up into the sky, up to the ground level people, and so you do get one in the light, but you only see it with the sun so bright from behind it. It's like a silhouette, and I think that was a very fantastic way to go. This episode, despite being made on videotape and the master being destroyed, it looks gorgeous. It doesn't look as good as Spearheads from Space, but that was filmed on film, and I've already talked about that. But here it makes up for it with great lighting and great colour. I mean, if you look at this cover and you see like it's got like the greens and yellows, and you like the look of that, you're going to be happy with the story, as that atmosphere comes throughout in the story. It reminds me a lot of a Hammer horror film where the dark colours, the blackness of the screen blends so well with the bright colours of reds and greens and yellows, and it just works. Now back to the actual story, as there's this operation that work with, I believe it's nuclear stuff, and basically they work in these caves, and they discover that when you go into these caves, people basically are going mad. And whilst this is also happening, there's been power fluctuations in this base, and so UNIT is there to investigate. Now, an important thing to note in this story is that it is the first Doctor Who story. Wait, apart from, if you don't count Mission to the Unknown, which didn't even have the Doctor in it, this is technically the first story that doesn't feature the TARDIS at all. It doesn't even get a mention, which is very bizarre. But here we get the Doctor's car, Bessie, gets its first appearance here, and I love this little yellow car the Doctor goes around in. Very cheesy, very 70s, love it. But there you go, that's his grass. And so we get, with the human characters, there's a bit more variety in their hatred for the Silurians. You've got one who basically doesn't believe what's going on, and he's like the boss of this operation, and he just wants this place to basically just keep on working, not close down. Despite UNIT and the Doctor insisting that they should close it down for the moment to figure out what's happening with this power loss. Then when we get introduced to the threat and stuff, when we go into the caves, which are some brilliantly shot scenes, we get a minor character as well, where he's gone mad and he starts doing cavemen on the walls. Now, a big problem with this story is some of its logic. There's this guy who goes mad and basically turns into a caveman. But they also explain as well is that when his mind digresses into a caveman, he can somehow draw perfect caveman drawings like he was a caveman from those times, which I don't think that really works. I don't think that's how madness works, but it does help set the story very well, as there's a great scene when the Doctor interacts with this guy. He's only in it for like a scene, but it is very well handled, but I don't think it works in terms of the logistics of it. But I digress. So later on, we get introduced to another character, Dr. Masters. He's like a minister of defense. I can't remember if he was defense, but he's the minister of something. And the Brigadier needs him to help him get more security, more guards, so they could go around and see what's happening in the caves. And he's sort of like in between. He's he doesn't know what's going on, and he doesn't really believe the Doctor and the Brigadier at first, but then slowly he does start to thing and takes the matter seriously, and he kind of feels like they should be destroyed, maybe, perhaps, but he is willing to negotiate. He is willing for the Doctor to do his things. And whilst this is all going on, you've got these two other characters who I can't remember the names of, and they have been working with the Silurians to try and get some technology which has been going on for a while, and that's why these power fluctuations have been happening. They have been using this power to revive some Silurians, and in return the Silurians would give knowledge of their science and technology, but they become a bit power mad, or at least the guy does, and he basically kidnaps the injured Silurian and threatens to use him as a bargaining chip to ask him for more information. But later on he is killed by this trapped Silurian who goes back into the caves, and his female accomplice, who discovers his dead body, basically thinks that the Silurians should be destroyed and should be killed because they can't be reasoned with, despite not seeing how it was basically his fault for kidnapping this creature. So there's a lot of like diplomacy and a lot of political theming coming around here as it deals with stuff like race and negotiations and stuff like that. And I think it works really well for the most part. I think the story is good, it's fun, it's entertaining, but I think it could have been a lot better if it took a lot more risks. Like, the story is mainly sticking on the human side for the most part, and when we don't see the side of the humans, it's mainly up to them just being mad or crazy, instead of really dealing with these issues. And with the Silurians as well, with just only two characters to really simplify this topic. Like, we don't really see what the other Silurian soldiers really think. It's really just one Silurian who believes that they could cooperate, which I think is fair enough, but I think it is a problem where the only one who gets killed by another Silurian is the one that believes in a trust in humanity, which means this whole dilemma is a bit more simplified, because the only ones the humans do kill are the ones that the Silurians who believe that humans should die. So I think it could have been a lot better with this premise. However, there are some great moments with the Brigadier and the Doctor here. One of my favourite bits is that the Doctor and the Brigadier are discussing about getting more evidence and stuff, and they play around with joking around about like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, and when they get called off, the Brigadier basically takes the mick and goes, "Come along, Watson," to the Doctor. So I love the banter between. There are some really great Doctor Brigadier and Liz Shaw moments in this story, and it really levitates it to being a great story. But like I said, it doesn't really delve deep into the theming of it, and we'll get into this at the very end. Now, with this story as well, in part 6, we get introduced to a pandemic as the new leader, the one that wants to kill humans, basically takes one of its prisoners, fills it with this disease, and then basically lets him free and lets him go out into the world where he will basically infect everyone. And this really is a realistic depiction. Not realistic, but it's a very surreal moment watching this story during a real-life pandemic. Here's a bizarre, strange coincidence. They say that the Silurians are going to get resurrected in 50 years' time, which would have been in the year 2020 now. And then later on in an 11th Doctor story, he actually travels to the year 2020 when the Silurians get resurrected. And in that scene, there's a scene where two characters are very far apart. So they're kind of social distancing. So strange predictions all around. Maybe this pandemic that's happening now is because of Silurians. Who knows? Oh, that's a really bad joke. I do apologise. So the story does deal with pandemic. So if you're sensitive with that kind of stuff, there's a warning out there for you. And it becomes like a huge dramatic part for the last two bits. Like, the story hardly deals with it, apart from a few mentioned in part 5. And then in part 6 and 7, it becomes like the main plot. The Doctor and Liz trying to work out a cure for this pandemic. And you really see the scientist side of the Doctor as he's testing all these scientific equipment to try and find a cure and stuff. And I really like these montages of the Doctor working. It really works with the atmosphere of this plague, and you do see a lot of people dying on the streets and stuff. So there's some great montages in this story. And they find a cure and so the solution, everybody's saved, hooray. And then the Silurians kidnap the Doctor and basically force him to take this generator that these humans have got and basically blow it up so that there can be no life on Earth by destroying some of the sun raises or something like that. I don't know the science of it. And the Doctor basically tricks them to go back into hibernation. And that's basically our ending of our story. But we're still not there yet. We've still got a few minutes left. And what happens is that the Doctor plans on reviving some, not all, but some of the Silurians so that he can work with them and get them to work with humanity. And you get the Doctor being a pacifistic, optimistic diplomat in this story. And you can see the Brigadier isn't too happy about this. And there's a great bit just before the Doctor leaves the building. The Doctor's telling him to not go in the caves, and the Brigadier is like too cheerful, and the Doctor can see that he's planning something, and he doesn't really think much of it. Probably he just wants to see you just wander around the cave, so he's like, make sure that nobody goes in the cave, Brigadier. And so they leave, and we get a scene then later on with the Doctor and Liz outside, and they see explosions in the distance as the Brigadier has set the Silurian base to be destroyed by detonation, and so all the Silurians are dead. So it's cold-blooded murder. This is one of the most iconic Third Doctor moments as he looks on in regret that he basically trusted the Brigadier with this thing and he's failed him. And a lot of other stories out of media really deal with this. But here, don't get me wrong, it's a brilliant scene, it's a fantastic moment, and it really should be highlighted as one of the better Doctor Who moments. But I wish it went a bit deeper, because if you really simplify it, this scene, it basically, the Doctor looks at the explosion, is like, oh no, the Brigadier, he killed all those innocent people. Oh well, it's just another day at the office, and then drives off. And I think there's so much they could have done with that premise. You could have had a really great conflict between the Doctor and Unit, and how he trusts the military and how he but here, and it doesn't really come to much apart from the Doctor kind of being sad at the very end. So, that's a bit of a shame. What I would have done is have the Silurian base be destroyed in part 5 or 6, and then have 1 or 2 episodes with the Doctor confronting the Brigadier and have him basically be the villain of the story. But that's more of like fan wishing instead of actually judging the story. So that's the Silurians, Doctor Who and the Silurians. There was a typo in the script that made it have Doctor Who and in the title, so it's actually officially called Doctor Who and the Silurians. So I guess it's Doctor Who and the Silurians, if that makes sense. But I digress. Overall, I think it's a great story. I know a lot of people do like this story, but I wish it could have been a bit better. I think with this premise, with this story, especially being the introductions to the Silurians, who become one of Doctor Who's recurring villains, we could have had a much greater story here. We could have had one of the great all-out best 7-part stories in the series, but I think the risks it doesn't take enough risks. It should have been a lot more grittier, a lot more realistic in terms of its portrayals of certain people, and I just think it might be my least favourite story of this season, season 7, I believe it is. So there you go. That's Doctor Who and the Silurians. So join me next time where we have some cool astronaut-looking creatures in the Ambassadors of Death. So I'll see you then on the Doctor Who Marathon.